Hi, welcome to the Rundown Movies. Today I'm going to explain a science fiction black box from 2020. Before we begin, warning, spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. Nolan Wright is suffering from a memory loss after a car accident that also cost his wife Rachel's life. He now lives alone with his daughter Eva, who takes very good care of him as well as the house. After he recovers, Eva asks him to go back to the company where he used to work as a photographer before the accident, and he agrees to go. After dropping her at school, he arrives at the office and meets his former boss but cannot get his job back as they think he has lost his focus and is not producing the quality work like he used to. Frustrated by the situation, Nolan meets his friend Greg, who is also a neurosurgeon and treated him after the car crash. While talking to him about his condition, Greg suggests visiting Dr. Brooke as she has an exceptional profile in neurosciences and can help him with his memory loss. As he visits her office, she sympathizes with him for his condition and tells him that his memory is totally corrupted. After performing a simple hypnosis test on him, she tells him that his memory is still there in the subconscious and he just needs to focus to bring it back. Although intrigued by the treatment, he leaves the office without any decision. The same day, he forgets to pick up Eva from school and she gets upset with him for his negligence. The teacher who drops her off also tells him that if he continues this behavior, they will have to notify child services. He talks to Eva and apologizes for not showing up and tells her about his failed job interview. She is too upset with his odd behavior and says he is making things more difficult for her as she already misses her mother and cannot afford to lose him too. The situation makes him think again and he returns to Dr. Brooke to get his treatment. She tells him that when a person has a near-death experience, his key life events flash back in front of his eyes and they can use them to bring back one's memory. She asks him to attack a device called a black box with him and explains the procedure that hypnosis will awake his subconscious and then the detector will send his memories to a processor to create a virtual experience. Upon his question about the duration of treatment, she tells him it can take a while but he is determined to do it faster for his daughter. During his first session, he finds himself in a baby's room. Dr. Brooke instructs him to stay inside the room because if he goes outside, she won't be able to bring him back. She asks him to find an analog watch and use his crown to remember something from his past life. He does the same and finds himself at his wedding ceremony, but cannot recognize any of the faces. Suddenly, a person with a disoriented walk starts walking toward him. He gets scared of him and uses the crown to get back. While sharing his experience with Dr. Brooke, he tells her he saw the same person in his nightmares as well, but she tells him it's just his brain trying to protect him from the trauma. She tells him if he wants to get his memories back, he has to shut his brain from thinking about that person, which he calls a thing. She admires his first session and tells him he is doing a great job and will be able to feel normal very soon. Greg visits him at the house and he tells him about the first session that he saw at his wedding ceremony. Greg remembers it and tells him he and Rachel always talked about their 40 years plan. Eva also joins in and says she knows about the plan and that she will be getting her first car at 16. Greg is very happy about Eva's presence in Nolan's life as he believes she will bring him back eventually. At night, as he sees the old photos, he picks up a chopstick from the table and it reminds him of something. He remembers the name of the restaurant they used to go to and takes Eva there, telling her it was his and Rachel's favorite place. In his next meeting with Dr. Brooke, he tells her about remembering the restaurant and expresses his thoughts that he thinks his memory might come back naturally. She disagrees with him and insists on continuing the treatment. Before sending him to his subconscious state, she advises him that if he spots the thing again, he just has to remember it's his own mind playing tricks on him and he must avoid these thoughts. This time, he finds himself in an apartment and hears Eva crying. He picks her up from the cart but cannot remember her face. He also finds some evidence of a fight and spots a woman in the kitchen with bruises on her arms. That strange man appears again and tries to choke him, but he returns. He shares his experience with her, saying he saw Eva and his wife, but could not remember their faces. He also tells her that he found himself in an apartment although he never lived in one. She tells him that the black box directly pulls thoughts from his subconscious, so he must have lived there but forgot about it. He meets Gary again and asks if he and Rachel ever fought because he remembers bruises on her arm, but he says they never got into a serious fight because he was a very cool-minded person. Nolan asks if he knows about them living in an apartment, but he has no idea about it. Nolan tells him it felt like his home, but Gary says he had a very serious head injury, so he might be hallucinating, but Nolan is sure it's not a hallucination. Gary further says they did not live in an apartment because if they did, he must have known about it. Nolan remembers the tower he saw in his session and tries to track it down. His search leads him to an apartment building and he remembers seeing the same fence in his session. Upon entering the building and seeing the stairs, he remembers someone falling down the stairs, but he does not know who it was. He enters the apartment he saw earlier and finds out it's exactly the same. He meets Gary again and asks if he ever beaten Rachel or cheated on her, but Gary thinks he was too nice to do any of those things. He tells him he was a very loyal person and always made sure to take very good care of his family. Suspicious of his odd behavior, Gary goes through his records again, which has hinted toward brain death, but then he miraculously regained consciousness. He asks his colleague about the day when Nolan was brought in after the accident. He tells him Dr. Brooke took him into her lab where he regained consciousness and everyone thought he was lucky to be alive. Jerry gets surprised to know that Dr. Brooke saw him that day as he never knew about it. Nolan goes through his memories again and sees faces this time, but they are unfamiliar to him. He also spots Dr. Brooke sitting by his side in the restaurant and he calls him Mom. This sparks something in his mind and he gets confused because he knows she is not his mother. As he comes back, he gets confused to see his face because it's different from the one he saw earlier. He also remembers his name, which is Thomas and not Nolan. She tells him he lost his life after falling down the stairs, but she kept his data stored to implant it into the right person. He cannot believe it as she tells him he has been gone for 2 years until Nolan was brought into the hospital and was declared brain dead by the doctors. She implanted his data into Nolan's brain and the person he has been seeing, it's his brain trying to adjust to the new body. She shows him the pictures of his family and he remembers his daughter Ashley. As Thomas used to torture his wife, Dr. Brooke asked him to consider this his second chance and make things right between him and his wife Murata. He asked about Eva, but she tells him he should not worry about her because she is not his daughter. After the session, he picks up Eva from the school and she quickly realizes something is going on with him as he does not tie her seatbelt like always. She starts arguing with him, but he scares her away after yelling at her. He tells her that he is leaving her with Greg for a few days because he feels like she is not safe with him. Greg meets him and tells Dr. Brooke took him into her office and he thinks it has something to do with his false memories, but Nolan disagrees with him. He seems too upset and as Greg spots him crying, he offers his help but he refuses it and argues with him as well, asking him to let him go. He learns Eva has written a note on his hand that reads "Don't forget me" on his hand, but ignores it and drives away as she sadly observes him. After dropping her off, he comes over to meet his family, but they don't recognize him. He pretends to be Thomas's friend and tells Miranda that he told him about their relationship and how patient she was with his temper issues. He asked about Dr. Brooke, but Miranda tells him she does not talk to her. Upon his question about Brooke's dream project of using brain waves to store someone's subconscious, Miranda tells him she does not believe in it. He reveals the research was successful and he is Thomas, her husband, but she gets upset and asks him to leave the apartment or she will call the cops. He tells her different events of their life, including their first date, wedding, and apartment setting, and tries to convince her, but she does not believe him. He also apologizes for his past behavior and requests a second chance to make things right. While looking around, he finds that Miranda has erased his memories from the house and there is no picture of him. He gets angry with her again and starts yelling at her as she asks him to leave. He goes to meet his daughter, but Miranda attacks him. He finds himself with Eva in front of Greg's house but sees his reflection in the mirror and gets scared. They try to stop him or talk to him about his condition, but he once again leaves without saying anything. He visits Dr. Brooke and discusses his condition. She says he ended up where he felt safe for the last time and it's his mind that is trying to protect him. She asked about his family, but he tells her they locked him outside. She feels that he must have done something wrong again and asks him to take control of his mind and do not let these thoughts in. Meanwhile, Greg sees the address written on his hand and after searching about it finds out about Dr. Brooke's son who died after an accident. In his next visit to the black box, Thomas recognizes the person as Nolan and tells his mom about him, but she orders him to kill him. He tells her that Nolan is still alive, but she asks him to proceed and he agrees, but just before he can stab him, he is topped by Eva and Greg's interference. Thomas remembers how he used to torture his wife and daughter and thinks he does not deserve another chance. He leaves Nolan and walks outside the door into the dark. Nolan wakes up and turns to Eva. Dr. Brooke realizes her son is gone forever. Nolan takes Eva home while Greg destroys the black box. In the end, Nolan comes back home with Eva. Dr. Brooke is dismissed due to her unethical experiment, but she uploads the date again in the black box.